All right, and welcome back, dear listeners. This is Life After Life Beyond the Veil. My name is Morgan. We are continuing with a 3-part series called Father, I Think We Need to See Other Philosophies. This is part 2, episode 2, The Daughter's Odyssey from Conventional Religion to Enlightenment, and the Freedom Found from Becoming a Believer of Everything. So the beginning is a very good place to start, don't you think? Let's pick back up where we left off, shall we? We were last speaking on the origination of my father's preaching style and beliefs. It began with the simple task of saving his daughter's eternal soul from what he later recognized to be damnation. As both a man of God and child of God, that became his whole purpose. To not only ensure his children never felt the heat from the fires of hell, but to save as many souls along the way as he possibly could. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? With that being said, I would definitely call my father's views leaning towards traditional with a hint of zealot mixed in. I would also say that he didn't just hug the line of the fire and brimstone mentality, but regularly dipped his feet in. And it is actually no wonder, considering who our pastor at the time was. You may have heard of him or not. His name was Reverend Hagee of Cornerstone in San Antonio. So this, of course, meant not only would my father preach of God's love and mercy, his children responsible for performing good works to ensure their salvation, but then he'd dispel you of the cocoon of safety you had created in your head that you'd be going to heaven. Because if you didn't hold the line, keep up your end of the bargain as one of the righteous, you would be in danger of going to hell. Your only company, the gays, non-believers, and fellow failures. The real kicker was, you would fall till God's love could no longer reach you. And that was truly hell. He reminded us that it was our purpose in this life, just as his, to be good stewards and to save as many souls in the time we were given. So in order to save ourselves, we just had to save everyone else. And the end times were always nigh. The panic always felt. The clock always tick, tick, ticking. Now, my father was not a bad man, don't get me wrong. People can listen to this story, they can read this story, and judge him just based from my words alone. But that is only a portion of the man. This story will never fully encompass who he was as a person and as a soul. It's like reading the synopsis or a specific chapter of a book, but then dismissing the contents of the remaining pages. Like trying to write a book report based on the back of the book. I don't know how many of you have also tried to get away with that in the past. I know I did when I was younger. There's a lot of experiences in those words that you would be missing. Experiences that a single paragraph or article can never even hope to depict. So to sum him up, the only way that I can, he was a sweet bigot who tried his best all his life in the only way he knew how, with the tools that he was given. Now, in regards to my own belief during those times, I had quickly become disenchanted with what was deemed Christianity. I mean, how could I not? Inundated with pop culture and news and, of course, my father's own leanings, it's no wonder that I struggled with what was true and what I believed was man's own brand of religion. It seemed to me to be this vain and selfish veneer that had been layered upon century after century after century. Like having a tomb of a book with just layers and layers of dust and crud on top, and you just want to blow and brush off that dust to see what is underneath. I couldn't help wonder, was God, the Father, who sent his own Son to speak of love, forgiveness, and everlasting life by his side, a manifestation of his own self made flesh? Or was God the disappointed Lord on high that punished his children for their sins and tested them for their fealty and devotion? A God who could smite and erase an entire civilization of his own creation when their will led them too far from his grace? Were they one and the same? A Father who loved but punished justly when deserved. And I don't know if you heard it, but I put quotes around justly. And over the years, it wasn't just the practice and the words that had tainted my view either. Words spoken on heaven started to take their toll, and you couldn't escape it. Heaven was there in every sermon, every Sunday. Heaven was supposed to be the ultimate, the goal, that which you could attain if you worked hard, had faith, and accepted everything that came from the Bible as gospel. A place where you would never have to feel the ravages of time, never be in pain, never know hardship or death again. Where the blind could see, the lame could walk, and your loved ones would surround you for all eternity until the end of time. That sounds really nice, doesn't it? In theory. But I tell you what, the varying interpretations that had been thrown at me filled me with fear instead of comfort. The first one, and it is no wonder, it was my father, once told me that when everyone dies, they are kept within their bodies waiting for the day or the time of rapture. Then they would be taken up by the Lord and given new bodies, stronger bodies to fight in the final war against evil. It wasn't the depiction of the tribulations or the rapture that turned me cold. Although I will say that these events didn't sound like anything that I would want to live through either, but what held me completely immobilized was the thought of dying. And this is just a heads up, I'm going to use some words with some imagery here that might not be too pretty. It was the thought of dying only to stay encased in my rotting corpse for who knew how long, until the time that I was called forth. I'm sorry, but that didn't sound like heaven to me. That sounded like another version of hell, no matter if it's the preemptive step. And of course, my father would then say to me, well, but it'd only be but for a moment to us. But it still didn't sound like something that a loving God would do to his children. I felt that a loving God would call us home immediately once our physical bodies were through, so that we would be surrounded by his love and never to know the absence again. Not a hole in the ground waiting for more death and destruction, like a tool put away until later use. So there was the first. Another one that stuck out to me, I don't know how many of you remember the movie with Robin Williams, What Dreams May Come. Beautiful movie. The imagery alone was phenomenal and just well executed. And of course, Robin Williams, the late Robin Williams, was just amazing. And some of you may disagree with me on this, but horrible idea. This movie, to me, was just another viewpoint on heaven that stained my relationship with God. While I still believed, all of this had stirred up doubt, which crept in and started to mix with my fear. Now, spoiler alert, the movie tells us that while hell is a torment of our own making, the way they represented heaven made me think, well, so is heaven. In the movie, everyone has their own paradise, filled with anything they can dream of, whatever makes them happiest. They create their own garden, a fantastical reality. And if your happiness is your loved ones, you'd conjure them into creation. So, for instance, for Robin Williams, his heaven was based on an oil painting his wife had done. And so the whole world, this whole realm to him, was done in vivid, beautiful colors like oil on a painting. Just vast landscapes. And then his family. But here's the kicker. They wouldn't be real, would they? Because those you love would have their own realms, their own versions of bliss. So then that means what you had would be a replicant. So how did that work? How was that supposed to be heaven? It didn't sound like any place I'd want to be nor thought of as joyful. It might sound selfish, but I don't want a fake. I would want the real thing. I'd want my family. So my limited understanding at the time struggled with these concepts greatly. I wouldn't know until much later that the fear and the doubt had spread like a disease until they coated everything in my life. Nothing had been spared. It's like a fine layer that turned corrosive to my being and how I lived each and every day. It started slowly. That's why I couldn't see it. It was a gradual creep across the innocuous at first. For instance, I was so sure I could feel the stares and hear the whispers and the thoughts of the people around me that followed me when I went out. Oh my God, look how fat that woman is. Jeez, she really needs to push herself away from the table. Maybe one less helping would do some good. God, why is that guy with her? Oh my God. She is so ugly, that poor thing. Bless her heart. So outings became far and few. Feeling beaten and ground down enough in life and by life, the idea of failing one more thing led to an inability to start one more thing. Procuring a job? Yeah, no, didn't happen. Then, flights to see my family every Christmas became not just a testament to the fear, but to terror itself. And I don't know how many of you have experienced true terror, but you would know the difference between that and fear. So sure that my plane would be the one that went down. I would be the unlucky one. What made me more special than anybody else? And there'd be no parachute, no magical rope that unfurled from the sky that I could grab onto. Just the descent and enough time to think about my family, my loved ones, and my upcoming death. I became a shell of a person, hardened to everything and feeling emptier than ever in my life. The comfort of my home became a prison that I could not and would not leave. So it was one afternoon during this time that I was laying on the couch, and my focus was pulled to a section of wall that caught the light coming through the window. And our loft has these 14-foot windows that have no blinds and really gets the direct sunlight coming in. And then our walls have never been painted, but they've been primed. And so they're this blazing white. And so this sunshine cast this blinding brightness to the whitewash of the wall. And I just stared at it. And as I dazed, that white started to turn warm and then took on a cream tone that then turned into this rose colored gold. And it wasn't just the paint, though, that was affected. The whole room itself took on this gold glow quality. And as I stared, I was soon lulled into that space between dream and wake. And if you're someone that meditates, you'll know this space. At the time, I did not meditate, but I could feel my body falling into a relaxed state that had been missing for so long. And I sank into that sensation. And before I knew it, before me was the length of a grand hall. No longer my loft, but a hall that stretched so far you could not see the end of it. No longer could I see my cement ceilings but above me was a ceiling so high you couldn't make it out. And the warmth that I had felt only a moment ago now bathed the entirety of this all-imposing space. And it was a golden hue that you didn't just see the color, but you felt it. And on each side, pillars and arches of immense size bordered the space and spanned the length of both walls, going off into the distance until again you could not see the end. And the source of that glow beckoned from beyond those mighty stone towers. And thousands upon thousands of people moved amongst them, coming and going, a constant flow. And then those people that were just arriving were drawn to this magnificent table that was set before them, whose enormity and opulence matched that of the hall itself. And at this table, people were coming and sitting, or sitting and talking and drinking and just being together in mass. And the table itself was set with a buffet of the most decadent drinks, dishes, flowers, candles, the whole array adding its own vivid brilliance to the picture before me. The drinks were celebratory, but not over-imbibed. The food decadent and rich, but not over-indulged. The flowers and candles were fragrant, but escaped the ebb of time. The setting adding their own tinkle and gleam like prisms being swayed by a gentle breeze. And I stood off to the side as a spectator. I felt like a welcome intruder to the picture before me. It's not that I would be condemned if I decided to become more than this silent sentry, but I censored myself. I was just content to remain as I was, just watching and experiencing. And then again, before I knew it, I blinked and a new vista was laid out before me. So extreme to the prior impression of the grand hall in imagery, dark to its light, but it was no less warm, no less welcoming. If the hall that I had just seen was day, this was night. In place of a table with courses, now ran a fathomless river, while the opposing bank was just barely discernible against the equally dark sky. The winding river had no end and no beginning. The current was almost placid, and millions of stars dotted the black expanse above and sparkled their reflection in the water below. It was like a moving tapestry of light, so bright. It was as if the depths of the river held the stars as well, and not just this opalescent copy reflection. Then a voice that was not my own, but felt so much a part of me. I didn't feel a separation. It told me that the river I now edged upon was the river of forgetting. It was the place where souls started again and started anew. They would be washed clean by its depths, their memories forgotten. A foundation clear to grow and build upon. They walked willingly into its soft, inky blackness to meet their next life, to awaken somewhere different, someone else, someone new, but still themselves at their core. And the subtle lapping at my feet relaxed me into its rhythm, and it held me in its time. I blinked again, and I was home, in my loft. My eyes opening to our living room, still dappled in that afternoon sunlight. My husband's keyboard still clicking away in the background. The dishwasher still humming its steady out of whack tune, and one of our cats purring at my chin. I tell you what, I remembered everything. I still do. Nothing has faded as dreams so often do. I felt in awe and just utter amazement of the overwhelming grandeur of what I'd seen. I tried to dismiss it as my fanciful imagination, being someone that dreams many a times of things that are so spectacular they could probably be sci-fi movies, but I couldn't dismiss it. I couldn't. It was then that I realized that while I knew what to call the river, the words still repeating in my head, I didn't have the same for the hall. And it was almost rapidly and unbidden, a name just came to me. The Banquet of Souls. And just as before, when I was standing at the river, the words were more felt than spoken. A voice not my own, but still felt like mine. It's hard to explain. I knew that what I'd seen and what I'd experienced had forever altered the way I believed. And I needed to know more. So I started reading books on philosophy and world religions. My reading list grew each day. Buddhism, Christianity, Hermeticism, Hinduism, mysticism, Spiritism, Islam, Judaism, Kabbalah, etc. Not wanting to settle on one religion, not on one practice, one belief, but instead all of them. I wanted to study their foundations and what strings tied them together. What made them part? I became enthralled in the creation of it all. The mystery, the similarities elated me and set me to frenzy. I found myself falling deeper and deeper and deeper into a rabbit hole. My study became an addiction, a craze. I had traded one vice for another. But one paragraph made it stop. One paragraph quieted my unquenchable need for what I didn't know. I had yet to know. When someone is searching, then it might easily happen that the only thing his eyes still see is that what he searches for, that he is unable to find anything, to let anything enter his mind, because he always thinks of nothing but the object of his search, because he has a goal, because he is obsessed by the goal. Searching means having a goal, but finding means being free, being open, having no goal. You, O venerable one, are perhaps indeed a searcher, because striving for your goal, there are many things you don't see which are directly in front of your eyes. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, 1922. I realized I needed to stop searching. I needed to let myself find and be found. So that concludes our episode for today, y'all. Join me next time for the final part of the series, Father, I Think We Need to See Other Philosophies, Part 3, Episode 3. Thank you again so much for listening. Happy years, happy tears, and cheers, y'all.